Yeah, I'm in a state of readiness.
Okay, we're recording.
Mate, that's deeply exciting.
Here we have Jake Dunbar and his mates having a chat in Benji's flat, in Benji's house, I would say, in the middle of the countryside in Cheshire. Oh, sorry, is it Cheshire? No, it's fucking Wales. Beg its pardon.
Shropshire postcode.
Shropshire postcode, definitely.
And the dogs are here. They're
Dogs
happy.
are here, the fire's burning, the burn's burning, the wine is flowing, and everything is good. Jake, what
We
do
just
you
had a
say?
curry. We just had a curry, and we couldn't get our usual. Get the sense
Thoughts
that Tom
of
was right.
India.
Yeah, shout out to Thoughts of India.
That was a 3 out of 10.
3 out of 10. Yeah.
Just a
I
waste.
don't
It's a
think
waste of
Thoughts
a
of India was that much better than that. It was all right.
It's good because it does the
I'll
bulky
give
gram.
us 8 out of 10 for that.
It's good because it has one speciality curry that's worth having.
Just got talking to them.
Do I talk close to it?
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah, a little bit more, a bit closer.
A bit closer, like that. Right in front of the microphone.
Yeah, you want it like a fist away.
A fist away, like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, but then when you
Okay,
breathe,
Jake,
you gotta-
mate,
you
yeah.
gotta
How
do
big's the
far.
fist?
Now, what should we have this conversation to be about tonight, lads? Should it be mathematics or football? Because
Neither.
I don't know anything about football. If it was football, I'm putting this microphone down, and you will not hear from me again
Well, I
tonight.
don't think any of us are into football, are we?
Or maths, as it turns out.
Well, what about politics then?
We could do some politics.
What-
We could do some
Politics.
current affairs.
Politics, I like it, Jake. Politics.
Politics.
Yeah. Well, what about this twat? What's his name? Starmer. Has he got a first name? I can't remember.
Probably a queer.
Starmer.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't accuse him of being a queer.
He looks like a queer.
He looks
quite
like
handsome.
a queer. He tastes like a queer. He smells like a queer, but I don't think he's a queer.
When did you taste
He's
him?
actually a WF faggot, a World Economic Forum intellectual faggot, and he is like that twat Johnson, whatever his name is. What's Johnson's first name?
You're thinking.
Boris Johnson.
I think you're thinking
and
of
Keir Starmer and the other guy, Rishi Sunak. They're all part of the same clique. They're all part of the World Economic Forum's.
You can't put Boris up there with Trudeau.
Oh gosh, he's just the same. He's
not.
a different flavour of Trudeau. Listen, Boris went to see Zelensky in Ukraine.
Boo.
After Zelensky had done a perfectly reasonable deal with the Russians to say, let's be gentlemen about this. Let's not have millions of Russians and millions of Ukrainians dead over this. Let's be gentlemen here and sort it all out. You know, and my mate Vladimir had said, yeah, let's do that. Yeah. And they'd penciled it all out under my mate Erdogan's tutelage.
What, the
And they come up
Turkish guy?
with what you might call Istanbul
Right.
2022. Yeah? It was actually March 2022. And under this deal, Zelensky, who's basically a Western oligarch's twat sort of front piece, agreed with my mate Vladimir that they would carve Ukraine up and Russia could have the bits it needed and Ukraine would have the bits it needed.
You mean
And everybody would be mates and no Russians or Ukrainians needed to die over this.
So would you go as far
That-
as saying that the Russian people who are in Ukraine would just remain Russian, and that the Ukrainian people in Ukraine would just be Ukrainian?
Yeah.
That's-
Anyone who
it
was
sounds
in
too
Ukraine
plausible, Ben. It's
who
too
was
plausible.
Russian should remain Russian and should not be completely discriminated against for being Russian. Yeah,
Or
they're
forced-
just allowed to be Russian, even though they're Ukrainian. And Zelensky kind of went along with that and said that's perfectly reasonable, Vladimir. And Vladimir said the only thing you need to do, Vladimir, is to stop listening to all these twats in NATO, yeah, and come along with us, yeah. We're brothers. We're brothers. We don't want to fight over this thing. Remember, Russia was all over Ukraine. at this
Come to my dacha.
yeah. So this went on, and Vladimir was quite happy with this. He said, "No, I'm now a sort of Russian. I'm sort of in with the West, but I'm in with Russia, and I can make a shilling a minute out of this." But and that was true. But
If I could just shift all these Nazis.
Called Boris Johnson turned up in Kiev and told Vladimir, you may not go along with this deal. Why did Boris say that to Vladimir? Why did Boris tell Vladimir that you're not allowed to make friends with the Russians?
And he's been telling him that he'd been pronouncing Kiev incorrectly all this time as well.
Well, it doesn't matter how you pronounce Kiev or Kiev.
I think it does a little bit, actually. I'm going to cut in there a bit. Kiev, we've always known it as Kiev.
It's always called a chicken Kiev.
It's called a chicken Kiev. And it's got garlic in it like a chicken Kiev. Like, chicken Kiev is how we pronounce it. I don't know.
Probably a chicken Kiev.
Probably chicken. And there's the capital of Ukraine, probably Kiev. Like, why do we need to say Kiev? And we were all sort of...
Well, none of us here are Russian speakers, and we don't know how the Russians say Kiev. Do they say Kiev or Kiev?
It was just to rebrand it.
It really doesn't matter. Anyway, Boris Johnson, who was he working for? Oh, the City of London had Boris was no longer Prime Minister of Great Britain. He was now employed very profitably by the City of London. Why is the City of London interested in this argument? Oh, yeah, because the City of London owned billions, I mean gazillions of bonds which were guaranteed by Ukrainian farmland. And those Ukrainian farmland bonds were worth tiddly squat if the Russians got hold of it, yeah? So the one thing that mustn't happen for the West is that the Ukrainian bonds, which were money loaned to Ukraine by the City of London and others, yeah, could suddenly turn out to be worth tiddly squat because Ukraine had done a sweetheart deal with the Russians and decided not to kill each other, yeah? And that was unacceptable to Boris's masters, the City of London.
And also those interested in grain for the season as well.
Yeah, grain. Grain's very useful for making things like whiskey, brandy.
And just generally keeping people alive in certain areas.
People
I
alive.
thought brandy was
Although we are too many.
Wine.
Grain is whiskey, isn't it? And that, yeah.
Anyway,
where was I? This Boris Johnson, who was no longer even Prime Minister of Great Britain, went to Kiev, or whatever it was, on behalf of his masters in the City of London, and persuaded said Vladimir Zelensky, who, let's face it, was only a comedian who was put in charge of this fucking show. For what reason? Just because he was good on television. Well,
he won an election as well, and he won an election on...
He didn't win an election, Ben. He won an election where nobody was fucking allowed to vote unless you vote for the party, and the party was Vladimir Zelensky.
He's now in charge long term as well, isn't he? Because they can't hold any free elections at the moment.
Zelensky has made it a rule, according to the holy law of the Ukrainians, which alter if not, that you can do anything you like except negotiate with the Russians, which Zelensky had been doing before. Except negotiate with the Russians or argue with Vladimir Zelensky,
or hold
who
elections.
Is now the living faggot, the living crow of Boris Johnson, who is nothing but the living crow of the City of London. So, why did...
What's a crow?
Why did 900,000, a million, I don't know. Why did 900,000 Ukrainian young men have to die in this so-called military operation?
Where are you getting these numbers from?
Various sources.
Which is the one you like?
Ukraine
the one on the YouTube channel?
Before this war, Ukraine had a population of 40 million. And of that 40 million, approximately 8 million, let's say, were men of a certain age, like not children, not doddering old fuckers like me. 8 million men of Ukraine were potentially available to fight for the truth that's Ukraine. And how come the Ukrainian army also had something like 8% of that population was in the army? Yeah? They were in the Ukrainian military. 8% of them. 8% of their manhood was already in the army. That 8% is already dead. It's gone, yeah? Because Russia finally threw the towel in and said, we've had enough of Boris Johnson and his fucking merry games. We are going to negotiate with the Ukrainians at the end of a fucking barrel. because those twats are our brothers, but they fucking ratted on us. So we need in there. And in the meantime, Vladimir Putin happens to be democratically elected a leader of Russia, which happens to be the only Christian country that's left alive in Europe. Every other one is, well, word economic for faggots. Yeah, they've given up on Christianity and they're now holy supplicants to the world.
Romania gone as well?
Sorry?
Has Romania gone down?
Romania might not have completely gone, but it's
Poland's
not like...
still got hope, hasn't it? They're trying hard, but...
Poland's still got a hope, but they've got lots of WF faggots between them.
Now the Tusk's in play.
Tusk, yeah.
And you're absolutely right, he is part of that fraternity. He's very Trudeau-y, isn't he?
Anyway, poor old Vladimir Zelensky, where was he? Oh, yeah. He was totally surrounded by Russians, yeah? So he trotted off to Istanbul for his only hope for Ukraine to negotiate with the Russians. A perfectly reasonable thing for the guy to do. I mean, after all, remember that Zelensky is only a comedian. He's only been put there, he's got no chance. So he went off to talk to Erdogan and Putin and his merry men in Istanbul in March 2000, after the Russians invaded in March 2022. And he came up with this perfectly reasonable agreement with the Russians. Yeah, sorry, we fucked up. Yeah, you really could do something to us and we don't like it. Yeah, we will be friends. You're Russians, we're Ukrainians, we're basically all brothers. Yeah, so Zelensky, although he's a twat, he wasn't a complete twat because he could see the logic that you don't want Ukrainians to die or Russians to die in this conflict. And then comes Boris Johnson to say, Zelensky, you cannot go along with this. Why?
Crow of the City of London.
Because his masters in the City of London were up to their necks in billions and billions, maybe trillions, of Ukrainian bonds that were guaranteed. Ukraine's got nothing except this farmland, which can produce amazing amounts of wheat, yeah, and other products. And the faggots in the City of London couldn't get their money back unless these bloody Ukrainians delivered, and the Ukrainians couldn't deliver to their masters in London unless they owned their own land, and they wouldn't if they agreed stuff with the Russians.
So where are we with it now then? How's it all wrapped up?
It's not wrapped up at all. It's still an ongoing conflict, isn't it?
Going? I thought
oh no, they'll kick the arse out of this long term because now, of course, it's really good because when you hear that the United States are giving a £90 billion package of weapons systems and whatever, it's just it's like the Enron. It's all just money on the bottom of the balance sheet that's being sent over there. So it's too juicy.
I mean,
what's the motivation in stopping?
Let's say that 90 billion. Zelensky gets 90 billion from the Americans. Yeah.
True cost to the Americans.
Well, some of that, like 20 billion, needs to be spent on actually buying arms from the Americans, unfortunately. So there's some till to pay out of that 90 billion. It's not 90
So they're just buying it on
It's only like 60 or 70 billion.
So they're just selling it to them on credit.
But anyway, this...
So you get to book that profit today. In a very mark-to-market accounting
The remaining
kind of
70 billion that Zelensky gets, it's not all for Zelensky, of course. He can't have 70 billion, fuck him. But there's all these...
Not that comic.
There's all these Ukrainian and Russian oligarchs who need their fingers in the pie. Yeah? So Zelensky has to share this out with all the other Ukrainian oligarchs. Yeah? So much for you, so much for you. Now, let's say you're a typical Ukrainian oligarch and you get allocated $2 billion from Zelensky, yeah? It's not all yours. You can't have that. You can't go off buying villas on the Costa del Sol with that. That money is for you to sort your team out. Now, your team is hundreds of people and they all need sorting out. So you've got to pass this all down the pile, haven't you? All these guys who work for you, who are in the know and could have you bloody well had up and thrown into jail in Ukraine for the rest of your life, need to be sorted out. Of course they do. So, there's 100 million for him and 100 million for him, and it goes down the trail. In the meantime, your 20 billion actually had to buy some arms for Ukraine. Now, Ukraine couldn't even use those arms. There's too much. The army couldn't use it all. But there's an international arms market. So, of all the bloody wire-guided anti-personnel grenades or anti-tank grenades that you've bought, you only need about 20-30% of those. The rest can be sold to, your Saddam Hussein and all that lot. You can sell it on the international arms market.
Brother.
You can sell it on the international arms market for hard cash. Not as much as you'd expect. Like, you get 10 cents on the dollar, but 10 cents on $1 billion is still 100 million, if you know what I mean.
The sooner you run out, the sooner the Americans will have to give you more.
Yeah.
In the meantime, there's a problem with all this logic. The Americans have got unlimited supply of dollars, but they haven't got an unlimited supply of anti-tank guided weapons. Yeah, they've got a limited supply of those, and they are running shit out of that material. Yeah, they are shit out of weapons. So when people say, "Oh, NATO should go against Russia," they're not like adding things up.
NATO's out of bullets.
NATO is shit out of bullets.
Like
They're shit out
left.
of 155mm
thanks-
rounds. But even
Thanks to the corona crisis still and the shipping getting fractured as well. Actually, currently it's not possible to remanufacture these munitions at the pace that we'd like to. So, again,
listen,
this is
one
of
of
the
the
big
problems
drawbacks.
with remanufacturing all those weapons, there's a lot of people in the weapons factories are women. Now they've now got women's rights, they've got like maternity rights, they've got maternity pay. It's fucking expensive to build weapons in that environment because half your labour force is like off sick or off pregnant all the time.
I don't know if there's that many people in weapons manufacturing that are women.
I think we've
I
got,
think
we've
you're
got
wrong
an
there,
idyllic.
Ben, especially in small arms.
I think we've got an idyllic version of this from the World War II.
That's what women specialise in. Darling, take yourself off to the small arms factory.
No. You need a hard...
No heavy weapons for you, darling.
For fabricating the outside iron case of a 155mm shell. That is an iron worker's job. He's a hard man who works with like hard presses and hot temperatures.
What's he called?
For the woman,
Thermo tool.
for the woman who like then delicately packs that full of all the various things you need inside
Put the
it.
doily on
That
top.
is women's work, yeah. And
Whilst collecting
in the
things from a
meantime, that's
Hessian
become a
sack.
lot more expensive. But so and so they're all busy. They're all busy selling Barbie dolls, which are Chinese made, and they can't do anything anymore.
I don't see what relevance that's got to women's manufacturing. This is something I did hear about women's jobs, which is interesting. There was a comparative study. The top 20 employers, or the top 20 jobs that women do, 2024, and the top 20 jobs that employed people who were women in 1924. So, like, you run down the list and there's some you'd expect there. You're sort of working with small children, working in healthcare, blah, 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 blah. And of the top 20 jobs that women do in 2024, there was 17 which made the list in 1924. There was 3 differences. I think, like, farm labour had dropped off and been replaced with HR. You know, like, so...
I'd like to see that list. That sounds quite
It
interesting.
was a good list. It was on the Whatever podcast. Shout out to
That sounds
Whatever.
interesting.
You need our support. Isn't that good? Isn't that interesting to know?
1924, small arms munition
I
worker.
don't think that made it on it.
2024, small arms munitions worker.
There'll be no heavy weapons manufacturer for you.
The Ministry for Medium-Sized Musicians.
Anyway, roll the clock back to 1922. And let's say you're one of those poor women who works in those munition factories.
I don't
Stuffing
think when
the
munitions
bullets
made it
full of
onto the list, though.
cordites. Yeah. No, but
you want to talk-
you're now back at what you like, which is like looking after old people and having your own children. Yeah? And you've now got a problem.
soft kittens.
Because all the hot stuff, all the hot men that you could have like really gone for, yeah, they were all killed on the Somme. Yeah. So, but you know, you're a sensible woman. You have to make do with what you've got. So you have to end up getting married to some bloody puffed faggot who you wouldn't have given us a lip spittle to before the war,
Could go
because
lesbian.
that's all the man that's left.
Could go lesbian.
Well, some of them did, of course. Some of them did, and I don't blame the ones who went lesbian
Begging the
because
question,
the
meat
men,
or cowboy?
the men in
Well, it's meat or
1924,
lesbian.
well, basically, apart from a few, there were some good ones, of course, but the good ones got snapped up very quickly. It's what the poor cows who couldn't get a good one had to do, and some of them took a very sensible option to say, these men are all faggots and poofters. Why don't we at least have some real human company and enjoy each other's company? So they decided to become lesbians.
That's how it started.
That's how it started. Then it only gets worse from there.
That's the real tragedy.
This is definitely one of our more feel-good episodes, I'd have to say.
Oh, mate. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
How much more time have we got?
We've got
Jim?
loads.
Yeah.
We've got fucking loads of time.
So, should we come back to the current day in the Ukraine?
We've done 20 minutes.
Are we finished with Ukraine, or should we?
Not
should we
quite.
label that a bit more?
Not quite finished with
Okay.
Ukraine.
How do you think it's going to
Because
pan out? then?
Vladimir Zelensky,
Yeah.
whatever his name is,
The comedian.
poor cunt, yeah? He was losing, yeah? And he was advised you need to start winning. And they come up with this clever plan that he would invade a daft piece of Russia that nobody needs, yeah? Right down,
1 2 1 2.
right down in the woods and the forests on the borders with Ukraine, where nothing exists. The only thing of interest in that whole manor is the Kursk nuclear power station. So Vladimir got involved in thinking that he could, get more public attention if he would only just invade Mother Russia.
Ballsy move.
Yeah. And he said, this is fucking outrageous. How can I do that? My army is decimated. I'm fighting a losing battle in the Donetsk. Why should I invade Kursk? And his NATO puppet master said, nah, it's all right. We'll sort you out. We've got all these Colombians, we've got all these Peruvians, we've got all these South Americans, we've got all these Africans who'll go with you. And what's more, those Peruvians and Africans and Colombians, they're not going to be empty-handed. They're going to be trained by thousands and thousands of NATO officers who understand men and who understand how to make an army. You need to put a few nominal Ukrainians in there, especially your best guys, because we need your best guys, because your best guys are fucking good, yeah? We've seen your best guys, and they are awesome. They are far better than our best guys. So Ukraine, with its best guys, together with a load of Peruvian and Colombian mercenaries, and a lot of NATO officers who were not working for NATO, they'd resigned from NATO, and they were now working as international mercenaries for hire.
Is that like the Wagner guys?
That's
No, they
the
were
Russian
but-
equivalent.
But
yeah.
this is the Ukrainian equivalent. Yeah? But they weren't really independent of NATO. They were bloody NATO guys. They were still on a salary and a payroll with NATO. They just sort of pretended to resign from NATO armies and gone off to work as mercenaries.
So NATO is the European army.
It's a collection of
basically
nations
the American European army.
who are all placed to
NATO
stand.
would be like a little puppy dog of no value if it wasn't for the United States. Yeah? NATO without the United States is just a stupid little twat, yeah? Which couldn't pull the skin off a rice pudding. Wouldn't frighten Vladimir Putin for 10 minutes. It wouldn't even frighten the bloody Iraqis for 10 minutes, yeah? But the Americans have got nuclear weapons and they've got a lot of guys. And they are scary. So
What's the link with the Latin Americans? Just bring me up to speed on that.
I
So
don't know.
there's
It's just that
Colombians.
Latin Americans are quite brainy. They're quite ballsy,
Because
and they're willing to go all around the world and fight for money.
Oh, okay. Because I've heard that
trade.
Pyongyang's finest are arriving on the battlefield on Monday,
Oh,
aren't
yeah,
they?
yeah.
Like, so this is going to be an
Well,
interesting.
that's another story. I can tell you about Pyongyang's finest. Yeah.
They are. I mean, honestly, I think that's going to radically change the field of combat.
Well,
Because at the moment, people have got a bit of
it
honour,
won't
a bit of
be
decorum.
radical.
Like
It's just
a
that-
North Korean militant.
It's just that something like 50,000 NATO and Ukrainian and South American mercenaries are stuck in Kursk. And the Russians are gentlemen. They like to take prisoners. They like to obey the rules of war. And in these circumstances, the Russians are saying these invaders of the Kursk region are not fucking gentlemen. They are terrorists. They have been shooting civilians, shooting up ambulances, shooting up everything, yeah, and creating terror. They are terrorists. They don't have any international legitimacy.
Sounds like Israelis.
We need to murder every single one of them. And the Russian army says, yeah, I know we need to murder every one of them, but our guys are decent. We ain't going to do that. So Putin does a deal with Pyongyang, yeah? They've got an army which is absolutely raring to go. They've got all the shit-hot guys all the shit-hot guys in Korea who've got any balls are in the army, yeah? But they've never had anything to shoot at. It's pathetic. You know, they've been like stomping their boots against South Korea and the Americans for the last, you know, for 3 generations. They never had anything to shoot at. Now their saviours come along, the Russians, they say, listen, we need a crew to come into Kursk and shoot the living daylights out of the 50,000 shit. Your guys need a military training ground. We'll give it to you in spades. Guys can actually die doing this training because these guys are hard, they'll shoot back, yeah? But you need experience with actual war, as, you know, they all agreed they did, and you've never had it. Well, your father's had it, but that was like so long ago. It's like in the grave for 40 years now, yeah? You need to, like, get up to speed with warfare, and what you can do is to send your best, not your ordinary, send your best Spetsnaz, you know, your best, like, military fighters to us. We'll give them some special extra Spetsnaz training, and then we'll send them into Kursk. And we've got this problem. 50,000 Ukrainian and NATO officers who need killing, basically. And our army is too gentlemanly to do it. But we trust you. You guys hate the West. You will do it for us. And that's what's going on in Kursk right now with North Fear now.
Well, as I say, it's going to make it's going to be a different battle. That's for sure next week.
Absolutely.
It'll be interesting to see what NATO can do about that.
Well,
because the North Korean, from what I've understood here, it's like they're quite radicalised. Like the military thing is not like it's not a career; it's a lifestyle. I think that's fundamentally the big difference between a lot of the European armies who, well, they might have families, they might have other things they like to do. It's a job, but I think the North Korean, it's a vocation, it's a lifestyle. So if someone wants to get home because they've got something else to live for rather than fight, then you've already got the upper hand if all you want to do is fight. So I think that a troop to troop, I think it's going to be interesting.
Well, the North Koreans will be a force to handle because they're also God's children, you know, and they'll fight like tigers.
So what are we going to do? Are we just sitting it out, and like us and the Americans, we just sort of...
No, we're Jake. We're just sitting around reading the news that such and such a NATO officer, Flight Lieutenant so-and-so, or Brigadier General so-and-so, has died in a training accident. Oh, fuck me, he hasn't died in a training accident. He was shot to pieces by Russians in fucking Kursk. Yeah.
Oh, so we're out there having a go as well?
Absolutely, we're out there. What do you think Boris Johnson was doing in Kiev?
Well, just get those deeds sorted out for that farmland, didn't he?
Well, there you go. Start your engines.
Start your engines. Rev up your engines.
How do they get on with their tanks? On the subject of engines, that we gave them quite a large amount of tanks.
Who has owned what amount of tanks?
Well, I think the Germans provided some tanks. We provided some tanks.
The Germans provided some Leopard 2s. They were fucking decorating museums in Moscow. The German Leopard 2 turned out to be an embarrassment. Why? Because it was a weapon, a very sophisticated Western weapon.
Benedict, you got talking to the mic.
That was designed to fight on certain battlefields between Russia and Germany.
It's quite a heavy tank, isn't it?
It's quite a heavy tank. It's too heavy for the fucking bridges in rural Ukraine, that's for sure. And that's the big joke, yeah? It was okay for German bridges, but it wasn't okay for Ukrainian bridges in the countryside.
They don't build a good bridge.
And also, in the way it was explained to me is that in these battlegrounds, which were envisaged by these NATO tank designers who designed the Leopard 2, there was a certain understanding that there'll be terrain, yeah? you can hide your tank behind a hill, behind terrain. Yeah? There's always going to be somewhere where you can get your tank in and start shooting at the enemy and he can't see you because you're behind a hill. Unfortunately, on the steppes of Ukraine, there ain't no bloody hills. There's a few bloody, what they call, I can't remember what they call them, like, you know, piles of landfill around coal mines. But there isn't really any real terrain. And so your Leopard tank, as opposed to your Russian tank, is too high. It can be seen by the fucking enemy. You can't hide it because there isn't any terrain to hide it in. And the Russians have better anti-tank grenades than we have. An anti-tank grenade is something fired by a tank which is laser guided. The tank commander needs basically something illuminating his target with a laser light, yeah? And he fires a round at this tank in roughly the right direction. I mean, he would nearly hit it. He would be only 100 meters off if there wasn't any guidance. But the tank target is illuminated above by a drone that's firing a laser light onto that tank, because some human operator said, that's your target, mate. Yeah? So this tank is shining like a beacon out there saying, I'm your target. And this dumb anti-tank grenade is got a laser homing thing on it. It says, that's my target. It's got active like fins on it. It can steer its way in, and that's my target. I'm having that thing which is shining because it's got a laser light on it. Yeah. So that's your modern anti-tank guided weapon. And you know, the poor old guys in Ukraine and NATO found out that their weapons are no fucking good. But also, there's the West has got the same. Unfortunately, the West guided weapons weren't got GPS, and the Russian invented this stuff called jamming. Yeah, you can jam the GPS, and so this Western equivalent to the Russian anti-tank grenade, yeah, which is fired by a tank, is fucking impotent, because the Russians have got this magic stuff called, you know, electronic warfare, jam the Americans' GPS. Yeah. So, you know, this thing goes for its target, but it can't quite see its target because it was told the target was there, and where there is moving around all over the place because of the Russian jamming.
What's the Navy doing? What these boys are doing?
What Navy?
Well, any of them, are they having a go as well?
So the Russian Black Sea Fleet was a pretty serious outfit, and they've lost a nuclear-powered submarine to missile strikes. They lost the Moskva, didn't they? That huge cruiser. That was to
Is that us? Have we had that? Were we hitting them up?
We didn't do it. Well, so what we did.
I think wasn't that drones again? Wasn't that unmanned boats?
The Moskva was unmanned sort of suicide drone attack. Not very sophisticated, like basically a speedboat with munitions on. The nuclear-powered submarine, whose name escapes me, that was a Storm Shadow strike, we believe. I think there was sort of 5 to 8 missiles. Yeah, there is a fly.
There's a fly, yeah. It's coming in on the mics.
That was shot towards them, and I think the Russians did manage to intercept some of them, but not all of them. They were sort of swarmed out, and it was quite a feat of sort of improvisation. They've got old Soviet era aircraft, the Ukrainians, and they were able to sort of bodge these sort of Western munitions onto them. It just goes to show, like, it's quite hard to fight the kind of conventional warfare you thought when you've got all these.
Storm Shadow is quite an interesting case in point, because if you don't know what Storm Shadow is, because you're Russian and you've never seen one and it's all secret, yeah? But if your guys could bring one down, not destroy it, because you destroy it, you won't find anything else about it. But if you could, like, bring one down so that it crash lands on your territory, you can then send it back to your boffins in Moscow who can tear it apart and find out how it works. And that happened, and you'll find that Storm Shadow is no longer an effective weapon against Russia, only because the Russians now know how it works and can jam it and can destroy it in the air or evade it or defeat its purpose. And so this idea that Western NATO have Storm Shadows and the French equivalent is fucking irrelevant, because those weapons have now been defeated by the Russians. They're not scared of them anymore. You know, so they can say, let us have long-range weapons.
I think they actually ran out of military targets in a naval sense anyway. I don't think the Black Sea Fleet exists much anymore.
It exists because Ukraine gets hit by Iskander missiles launched by Black Sea Fleet boats every day. But, yeah.
Fucking hell. It's a rough time.
The Iskander missile is something to think about. This thing can fly at 20 times the speed of sound. That is so fast you can't imagine it. It takes only 8 minutes to reach Kiev from the Black Sea. Yeah? It can maneuver at up to 50 G. Yeah? If you experienced a 30 G crash in your car and the seatbelt and the airbag didn't save you, you'd be dead. This missile can maneuver at 50 G.
It's like
yeah?
Tom's driving.
You can't touch this thing. You can't touch this thing with an anti-aircraft missile, which is designed to like hit targets which can maneuver at 2G or 3G or something. Yeah, it can't bloody get round it, because you aim for where the bloody thing was and it's not there. It's gone. Yeah, because it manoeuvred at 50 G away from where you thought it was going to be, and it's still flying towards the target. So you can't shoot them down. When this thing comes in, shoot, bang! Yeah, yeah, it's gone. The target is gone, and you are left trying to explain to your public why the target is gone. Well, for a start, it wasn't a target, was it? It wasn't really a target. You know, they only hit this children's school in eastern Kiev, which happened to be where you had your main military base. You know, and
it's popular, isn't it? School hospitals are good as well.
Hospitals are good, yeah. So there's so many examples of how now the thing about targeting and the Russians is this in Ukraine. The Russians have an amazing advantage in Ukraine compared to anybody else, against anybody else. And that is half Ukrainians are fucking Russian patriots, yeah? They actually don't like Zelensky and his crowd. And there's this amazing eyes on the ground network which is feeding the Russians with military information. Like, you know, last night 50 NATO officers, presumably NATO officers, turned up at such and such an airport and were transported in such and such a vehicles to such and such a hotel. That's all the Russians need to know. Hit that hotel tonight and you've destroyed probably 50 NATO officers. And that's what's happening all the time. And so nothing moves on the ground in Ukraine except the Russian military command know what's going on. And so my advice to NATO people is don't go into Ukraine unless you want to die, because the Russians will kill you.
Pretty simple, pretty straightforward.
So, do you think we're going to see any nuclear action?
Nah.
What's that based on?
You won't see nuclear action, not because the Russians aren't man enough for it. You won't see nuclear action because the Western faggots in charge of their side of the story aren't man enough for it. They don't want nuclear war up their arse, and they won't get it. So they can say, oh, Vladimir Putin and his red lines, it's all bollocks. It's not fucking bollocks. And the Russians have explained to the West, in no uncertain terms. You see, take Britain and the Storm Shadow missiles. Supposing the West fired 10 Storm Shadow missiles towards targets deep inside Russia, yeah? And Russia said, you've crossed our red lines now. That is over the top. What could the Russians do about it? Short of going to nuclear war. The Russians don't need to go to nuclear war. They've got the Iskander missile. So there's 2 factories in Britain. One, I think, is in the north of England, and one's in the south of England. But I won't disclose the details of where those Storm Shadow factories are. But the Russians could suddenly zap those two factories with Iskander conventional missiles. A few civilians might be killed, a few workers might be killed. But basically, suddenly, Britain realises that even our production facilities of Storm Shadow missiles could be destroyed overnight by Russian Iskander.
What kind of worker would you say is building those missiles?
Well, not exactly your average worker, I would say, Tom.
Not women?
No.
Where are they from? Are they South Americans?
Well, they're probably Kenyan Asians or something who are trained in the right kind of stuff. It doesn't matter
Probably
who
Kenyan
they are,
Asians.
but they're working in Britain and they're working for those factories. They understand the process of putting together a Storm Shadow missile, which was designed by Western experts 40 years ago. I mean, none of this stuff is the latest thing, you know.
Do you think Russia's holding back some of its best men and kit anyway?
Oh, absolutely.
We're not seeing very much.
Listen, one theory which I don't particularly go along with is this: that the Russians realised that they needed to distract the Ukrainians, and so they came up with this cunning plan, which was the Kursk region, which is full of forests and rivers and lakes and fucking like a few wooden dashes, and they said leave it open. And NATO fell for it. NATO said, let's attack the soft underbelly of Russia with Ukrainian forces backed by NATO help. And we'll go in there. And the Russians pretended to be weak and not know what's going on. But they weren't weak and they didn't know what was going on. Notice that the Ukrainian NATO forces never got anywhere near the Kursk nuclear power station. And they all suddenly found themselves bogged down in southeast Russia. But that's a great environment because the war between Ukraine and Russia is a what they call a war of attrition. Yeah, it's killing their equipment and their men faster than they can kill you. Yeah. Now, Russia has an objective, and that's to kill as many NATO and Ukrainian assets, albeit military hardware or men, as you can, given the conflict. So what a brilliant opportunity to have a lot of NATO men and Ukrainian men shoved into Kursk, where we can bomb the bloody hell out of them and even bring in North Korean forces to wipe them out. And so it could have been, the whole Kursk thing could have been a cunning Russian trap to lure NATO and Ukraine into making a catastrophic blunder, because the Ukrainians justified their invasion into Kursk on the grounds that this will force the Russians to bring military forces from the Donetsk round to Kursk to defend it. Well, no, excuse me. The Ukrainians are down to their last fucking soldier, and the Russians are not, you know? So the Russians had hundreds of thousands of soldiers who were, like, bouncing up their jib in such and such a Russian town, not knowing when the fuck they get involved in this fight. And suddenly they get the good news, you're going to Kursk, because that's where they've invaded. So they rush over there and start building their lines. And they build their lines deep and hard, you know. No way you're getting to the Kursk nuclear power station. We're going to kick your ass right out of Russia. But we're not going to there's no need to do it quickly, because the doctrine is to kill as many NATO and Ukrainians as possible. The doctrine is not to restore Mother Russia to what she was before the start of the war. The doctrine is to kill them, yeah? And so...
I think that my one critique of this is you seem to only ascribe genius to Vladimir Putin and only ascribe malice to the Ukraine and the Western backers.
Well, I don't know about
Can I just finish
ascribing...
a point? You just like you've basically monologued. Can I just? It does seem to be that it's possible that Vladimir Putin, and I said this at the start actually, look at leadership. He's been around for a long time, probably a far more competent person than is anywhere else. You know, if you looking at leadership, the Russians probably have an advantage. It seems to be level of competence and experience that isn't present in the West. However, how much an advantage does that give you? I don't think, in terms of leadership decisions, he's going to be making flawless decisions in the same
No,
way
he
that
doesn't. He
the same way
makes
that he's-
completely flawed decisions, I agree.
And the corruption and malice that you ascribe to the West, and like God knows, I think the West ain't a great place. It's certainly not as great as it thinks it is.
I think it's pretty good.
You think it's good?
Yeah.
You're a fan, Jake.
You think the West is good, Jake?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Give it another 6 months and see how
I
you
wouldn't
think.
I wouldn't trade.
Come to my dacha.
who would you? Where would go if you could live anywhere?
America.
You live in America.
Yeah, USA.
Which state? What you think?
Any of them.
Texas.
Texas.
Yeah,
Texas. probably
Texas,
the winner.
any, California, wherever
California's
you
a shithole.
want. Not all of it.
A lot of it, mate.
Nah.
I've heard the statistics about homelessness and needles.
Yeah,
and shit
but
on the
that's
floor.
like, you just avoid that. You just stay away from it, don't you? Do you know what I mean?
Shit on the floor.
Yeah, you just fucking
What,
go,
you levitate.
don't get out your car.
I'm not sure about California.
Mate, I think it's good. I like America. I think, you know, the thing is with America is that, like, they own the culture. That's their biggest export.
It's the land of the free.
It's the land
home
of the free,
brave.
mate. It's the land of opportunity.
It's big. I think I'd like to go climbing those mountains.
Listen, mate,
I'd like to go
right?
see those deserts.
When you look at America, you look at, like, the infrastructure you've got. All you have to do is, like, you look at sports. Look at, like, the college football system. Like, no one's beating them. Do you know what I mean? Like,
because no one plays American football.
no, but what I'm talking about is I'm talking about the program. I'm talking about the regiment that those guys have. Like, just everything. Like, the whole, like, culture of it. The whole thing. They're just all about. They just love winning.
Well, I think there's plenty of sports people like winning.
Yeah, but
You don't need to be American. That's not uniquely American.
America win the most.
They don't.
They kind of
actually.
do.
Have they ever won a football World Cup?
Yeah, but they don't play.
Have they ever
football.
won a rugby World Cup?
Yeah, but they don't play that shit.
You know, like
You mean
What,
soccer?
cricket? What, have they ever won table tennis?
yeah, like nearly
No.
all the sports in the
Listen,
world have
trust
been made
me.
by the Anglosphere.
Trust me, right? Okay, if you got a bunch of those American football players and you taught them how to play rugby, they'd fucking wipe the floor with all of
I
them.
don't think they would.
I think they
I
would.
don't think they would.
I don't know. How many black
But,
people...
again, what the
Listen,
fuck do you know about rugby?
how many black people play rugby?
Lots.
A few.
I know, but there's more black guys playing American football.
Yeah. But it's a false dichotomy, that.
And they're £300 and they're steadied out of their minds.
They are big.
Do you know what I mean, mate?
Yeah, but
That's
I
what
don't
I'm
know if you,
saying.
I don't know if you... Yeah, I'm not sure where I stand on test. You like, how enhanced? What's the appropriate level of enhancement?
As much as you can. As much as you can get away with, you know.
Yeah. But what about the people that don't want to do that? Then they're out.
What, you mean losers? You mean people who don't want to win?
That's what you like about America.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
I love the delusion of them. They're just so delusional, like the fact that, like, you know, it's great.
Yeah, I was listening to a couple of chaps talking about, they were British lads out in America. They said, well, there's an illusion of this classless society out there, which you get in a lot of these sort of post-colonial, you know, sort of settler communities, which America, I guess, at one point, you know, there's still the vestige of that there. And they said what they miss about Britain was, well, the class system is here, and it's sort of not concealed in the way that it is out there. You know, there's, you know, the upper middle class in America does a great job of pretending to be classless and open to idea, whilst protecting its, you know, sort of the gates that you have to go through to get in there. No one's doing. You know, like the class. You know, the American dream is just that. It's a dream, and it's not necessarily real.
America's got the best racism. I think it beats our racism.
Well,
Oh, racism.
Yeah.
we've always had quite a weak racism. Okay, I guess
Yeah.
if you want to look at it that.
I think they've got better racism than
I
us.
don't know though.
Stronger. Do you mean stronger, Jay?
I just mean, like, better as in, like, because I think over here, I don't think the racism's quite the same over there. Like, you know, I mean, it used to be good,
Here
but
in Britain, people don't really hate people from other races. They
No.
don't really hate them.
no.
Well, I'd say. Can you remember when apartheid was going? There was one country in the
Where
world.
at? Where at? What are we talking?
South
South
Africa.
Africa. Yeah, yeah.
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 60s, 70s, 80s, and it finished famously in sort of like 94 and Kumbaya and Nelson Mandela and all that. The one thing the Americans hated more than anything else was that there was a country full of white people who were more racist than them. They couldn't stand that. They couldn't brook that at all. There you go. What do you think about that theory?
Well, I don't know. I think the racism was probably like a bit founded, wasn't it? Over there, because like the blacks were like killing the whites quite a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, Africans do some good racism.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
They're really good.
Yeah,
Actually.
they're quite
Yeah.
keen. The Asians aren't bad either. Actually,
Asians are pretty good.
They're
Asians,
on the sly.
Yeah.
They're actually like a real quiet underdogs there,
Well, they
aren't
are
they?
pretty clever fellas,
In
aren't
the
they?
racist it might
yeah,
want.
I mean, Asians are very racist against each other.
Yeah,
aren't they?
very much so.
Yeah.
Oh, this is something we'll talk about, Teddy.
Talk about Zimbabwe.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, Mugabe.
When Zimbabwe was like going over from B Rhodesia to Zimbabwe,
Yeah.
there was a political mantra in Zimbabwe, in Harare, yeah? One man, one vote. One man, one vote. And if you don't vote for the fucking Bishop Warner, I'm going to shoot your fucking legs off.
So I was talking, Teddy and me were having
Bishop Mugabe, yeah.
our favourite, we were having a favourite dictators. What if you called your pets after dictators?
With who?
Teddy, my eldest.
Right.
He's a wise guy.
Yeah, so we were talking, okay, you can't just go for the obvious ones, you've got to go for the more niche ones. And sort of like, what's on your roster of, and Mugabe came up there, and my argument...
Tom.
Yeah.
You got to stop thumbing the mic like that.
Yeah, he's such a mic thumber, isn't he?
You're fiddling with it, and it's yeah.
I'm not doing that, am I?
I know. I'm watching you though, Ben. I'm watching you breathing.
What do you mean? How can you watch me breathe?
I'm watching you.
To talk when asked to breathe.
Yeah, it's those in between the words.
It's impressive how focused he is.
Pass the mic away. When you're talking, bring the mic.
Yeah, that's it.
So we were talking. Anyway, we got onto the subject of Mugabe because we were talking about what dictators, what kind of names could you put in there? We had positive Mugabe,
Yeah.
and we were talking. And I was thinking about this. Mugabe, although he did bring a perfectly functional economy down to its knees, he didn't actually institute state-sponsored genocide in the way that lots of African dictators did. In fact, realistically, look back now, the great man's dead.
Yeah.
He was actually as benign an African dictator as you're ever likely to get.
So wait a minute, you're chatting to Teddy about this.
Yeah.
Does he know the Peep Show reference about picking the dictator?
Picking the dictator.
Yeah, which bit?
I don't know if he does.
No.
Like he knows
is,
lots
is he too young for that? Is he the Peep Show reference?
Yeah, I think he's probably missed that reference.
But
yeah.
dictators is cool.
But Jay, there was a time in Zimbabwe, it doesn't matter if you're black or white, it doesn't matter what race you are, yeah? There was a time in Zimbabwe when every family, rich or poor, black or white, faced the same dilemma, yeah? Do you go with the Zimbabwe dollar or do you buy the US dollar?
US, every time.
Every time you buy the US dollar. So the families, black or white, which said, we're not having any more of these Zim dollars. We're just going to convert our currency into US dollars. Yeah? They scored, yeah? After the Zim dollar failed, they were the only ones with any money left, yeah? Because they had American dollars. Now, an American commentator had noticed that the American dollar was a load of shit, yeah? Went to Zimbabwe to interview people, and he particularly picked on white guys, yeah?
Guys, sorry to interrupt you there. We're going to have to wrap it up.
Oh, right.
We're up to 55 minutes. Just done quick 55 minutes.
Anyway, I can wrap this up for you, Jake.
Okay. Go on then.
This American journalist, yeah, was interviewing, and for some reason this genius only picked on young white guys in Zimbabwe, yeah?
Yeah.
And he said, why do you trust the US dollar? He said, oh, we just go along with the government, yeah?
Yeah.
Said, well, the government advised you to have Zim dollars before.